right now. Pittsburgh's best sports show is about to begin. Call us or tweet us. We've got things to talk about on the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook.
Thank you, Ken. Welcome, everybody, to the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call, powered by FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm Josh Taylor, in tonight for Bob Pompiani. We have a lot we got to get to. Steelers, of course, still going through training camp. They've taken a little bit of time to get themselves together, but Ben Roethlisberger talks about his recovery from elbow surgery. Pirates lose a 2-game set in Chicago. And the Stanley Cup playoffs keep rolling along. A pretty crazy game tonight between Tampa and Boston. We got a lot to talk about. But to help me do that, he is one half of the PM team. Weekdays 2 to 6 on 93.7 The Fan. Chris Mueller joins me in the studios. He's actually switched up jackets, too, from when we talked earlier this afternoon. He's a man of many talents and many colors, so he brings them to the table. Chris, what's happening, brother?
Oh, same old, same old. Trying to, just impress with my dress here. Repping Bernie Kosar, of all people, on the T-shirt today. So I'm going to be sidearming all my takes out there. It'll look very uncomfortable, but it'll somehow get the job done until the AFC Championship game rolls around. This joke was even better in 1988. As
long as Eric Metcalf is not returning punts, I'm totally cool with it. Deal? I can live with that.
I got that. All right. I'm going to claim Hanford Dixon for my team, however.
All right, as long as they get Webster Slaughter. We can go back and forth with this. I'm okay with it.
I was going to say, this isn't going to play too well if we do it any longer.
A lot of people won't catch those references, but that's beside the point. That's back to better days with that rivalry. But let's get into the quarterback who actually has been pretty spectacular whenever he plays in Cleveland, and that's Ben Roethlisberger. He had a lot to talk about in that new documentary miniseries called Bigger Than Ben. He talked about his recovery from elbow surgery and how he's been playing with pain in that elbow since his rookie season of 2004. And he talked about a moment when playing against the Cleveland Browns might have been the initial point of that injury that he's been playing with for almost 15 years.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing about this, Josh, and my big takeaway is just if it happened in, I believe he said his third career start was that game against the Browns, diving for the end zone. I get that football players are tough. They are all, every one of them, wired a lot differently than you or I or the average person in terms of pain tolerance, competitiveness, etc. But it's so weird to me that a guy like Roethlisberger wouldn't at least look into in therapeutics or surgery, something to correct that arm as the pain got more and more nagging. The fact that Roethlisberger seemed to just be fine with, hey, I'll play through it, I'll do my thing, I can still put zip on the ball is a little strange to me. You would think that he would have elected to go with surgery or some other kind of fix for that arm problem long before everything actually snapped and the you-know-what hit the fan for the Steelers last year.
And let's kind of add to that a little bit because he talks about just the process of that game against Seattle last season when he came out with that elbow injury. But if you look at the tape from that game, he had a couple of throws during the course of that game that weren't necessarily accurate or didn't really look like his standard fare over the past decade and a half. So it kind of makes me wonder just how much of that contributed to some of those passes he threw maybe in the past couple years that might not have been accurate or may not have had that same kind of deep zip that he has throwing down the deep parts of the field. And does it make you wonder just how much it contributed to some of those errant throws he's had in the past few seasons?
Yeah, I think it does, first off, and I think he had a reputation, Josh, as one of the best deep ball guys in the league, especially in the early and mid parts of his career, and that reputation has taken a hit of late. But he can throw, when he would get a good one still, he would throw an unbelievably pretty deep ball, almost unrivaled. I think top 5 or so guys in the league in that department. If you want to look at this really optimistically, and this is kind of my big picture thought about the whole thing, if you really believe that some of his throws were genuinely affected in a very adverse manner by this injury, then I think you've got to be optimistic that this guy coming back in great shape, looks like the best shape he's been in a long time in terms of his weight, and with presumably an arm that he's trusting more and more every day, I think you've got to believe that this really could be one of those sort of late career renaissance years, whatever you want to call it, where a guy who's closer to 40 by a lot than he is 30 plays like he's 26.
Not to mention he gets almost a year to rest up because he only played 6 quarters last season. So that's, 14 and a half games where he wasn't getting knocked around last season. So that contributes to it too. But as far as the team is concerned, and you and I talked about this during KDKA News at 4, as far as the Steelers' chances for the season are concerned, we talked about it before. They're ranked 13th on ESPN's power rankings. The over-under for wins is around 9.5, and The Athletic even said, look, we're not touching it because things can go either way with a healthy Ben. But for you right now, that win total, how much better does it look with what you mentioned with a healthy Ben and a much more energetic arm?
Well, I think the optimistic version of me, like best case scenario, I think is 12-4. I just think that's a hard record to get to. I think that's just about everything going their way within reason. In terms of the win total of 9, I would still be betting on push right now, not being able to see anything else. In fact, my sort of unofficial prediction that I think I lodged about 2.5 months ago in the show when we had no idea if sports would be coming back at all was 9-7. I thought they and the Browns actually would be comparable teams this year, and the Browns have already suffered a bunch of injuries. Realistically, I'd put them at 9-7 as a starting point, Josh. If Roethlisberger's pretty good, 10-6. Really good, 11-5. Oh my God, he might challenge for the MVP and the comeback player of the year is his, then they're a 12-14.
That's an interesting discussion because comeback player of the year is pretty much in the scope of possibility now if he plays at least a good chunk of the season. Now, the big thing last season was not having Ben made it more difficult for this team to win games. Now that we see a healthy Ben back on the table here, what's the next big concern as far as what this team should look for if things go wrong? If Ben stays healthy, what's the next biggest concern for you?
I think it's a couple of different things, actually. The one is the running back room. Does anybody emerge from that, right? Like, you know how we do the old joke, who you put everybody in there and say, fight your way out, and who gets out? Well, most of those guys would end up getting injured, right, if they were actually fighting, because that's been the thing with James Conner. The guy can't stay healthy in the pros. So I think they need to run the ball situationally well this year. Maybe not run it, 55% of the time. Nobody really does that outside of a handful of teams, maybe the Ravens obviously being one of them. They've got to run it well situationally, and that means somebody needs to step forward in that room. Benny Snell has gone through the Le'Veon Bell light year 1 to year 2 body transformation. We don't know if it's going to translate on the field. So that's one major area of concern. The second one would actually be the defense, but I'll be specific about this, and it's the turnovers. They forced, 38 last year, if memory serves? They were number 1 in the league in takeaways. That is not something that usually translates from year to year and carries over. It is a very volatile statistic. Some people will tell you that, hey, their offense put them behind the 8 ball last year and the defense did incredible work to do what they did, and it'll be even easier for them with leads presumably this year to pin their ears back and force more turnovers. It just usually doesn't happen that way. How many games did they win, Josh? Like 3 at least? The Colts game, the Rams game, and probably the Chargers game solely because of defensive scores and splash plays? Think about that. That's the difference between 8-8 and 5-11. So I think the running back room and the defense in its ability to be great without maybe forcing 38 turnovers are 2 things that you should be concerned about, or at least be thinking about in the back of your mind.
I'm going to amend your running back room analogy and give it a little Mike Tomlin spin. 5 dogs, 1 bone. Make a little bit more of a better picture for you?
Yeah, but I mean, do any of them even want to grab the bone? It's like one of them's going to pop a hamstring on their way to the bone, and then the other couple guys can't really do anything because we don't know what they're all about. Like, is somebody going to throw the bone at them and one of them's going to drop it? I mean, what's going to happen here?
Well, here's what we'll do. We'll take a break. We come back. We'll take some phone calls. We'll see where we go from there. In the meantime, we'll see you in a couple moments. Stick around.